Hello, everybody. Welcome into GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Tuesday, February 18th. Hope everybody is having a great day so far. We have a lot to get into. As the title says, a sport-altering meeting is taking place this week between the SEC and the Big Ten. We touched a little bit on it at the end of our show yesterday. We're going to do a deep dive into it today, talk about all of the repercussions and what they could be talking about when this meeting takes place down in New Orleans. We'll also get into some football talk, talking a little bit about Justin Fields, where he might go and how much money he might get, what a potential Justin Fields contract might look at, before continuing our series going over the off seasons, a perfect offseason for each NFL team. Moving on to the NFC South with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, previewing the MLB season, looking at the Colorado Rockies, and finally, going over one of the biggest dramas going around the MLB right now, as Rafael Devers and the Red Sox are currently in a fight over what position he's going to play. But before we get into any of that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Tuesday, February 18th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into our first topic of the show, which is that sport-altering, league-altering meeting between the Big Ten and the SEC. These two conferences have really grabbed the reins of control in college football over the last couple of seasons. Now, they have been the dominant forces over the last 15 to 20-ish years. And if you go over just the last 11 since this new playoff format started, it makes sense the way that they're trying to decide this, right? They have now flexed their muscles twice in a row these last two off seasons. The last off season, it was about the TV rights agreement, trying to get a bigger split, a bigger piece of the pie from the TV broadcast agreement that the NCAA was going to strike with these major networks. They both got 29% of the pie, leaving the ACC and the Big 12 with just 17%, and the other schools, the Group of Five, Notre Dame, with even less. They already flexed their muscles once. They threatened to leave. They said, we're going to go and start our own league with just the Big 10 and the SEC, and the NCAA caved. They said that would not be good, and that showed them that they had a card to play every single time, at least while they hold the power, to get whatever they want done. So now these two conferences, the Power Two, are meeting up once again. And right now, coming out of that meeting is the potential plan for the upcoming playoff format. It's going to change after this year. It was a 2-year tryout deal for the 12-team playoff. Now they're looking at expanding, and they're going to 14 or 16 teams. And the way that they're going to split this up, because there's been a lot of debate about what to do, whether to keep the auto bids at 1 with the conference champion, keep their seeding the way it is, reseed later on, just give the auto bid but not give them a top 4 seed. There's lots of ideas of how to do this, but the one that the SEC and the Big Ten really like, because it benefits them the most, is the one that they are proposing. They would get 4 auto bids each. That's 8 of the 14 or 16 spots in the tournament going to the SEC and the Big Ten, with chances of there being even more with the at-large spots. There would be 2 automatic bids for the ACC and the Big 12, them being the second tier of conferences, 1 for the Group of 5, just so they can have their chance in the limelight, and then 1 for either 1 or 3, depending on 14 or 16 teams, at-large bid. And that one's there for Notre Dame, and if they go to 16 teams, then it would be there for whoever else would be there that year, right? The other thing that they're talking about doing is not doing conference championship games anymore, which we talked about a lot this season as something that was going to go away or be diminished based on the system of playoffs that they do, based on the automatic bids, and that the way that they did it this year made it mean more. Giving the conference champions a top 4 seed made the conference championship mean something. Now what they're doing for the ACC and the Big 12 is they're talking about automatically giving that bid to their number one team, and their conference championship week would be between the 2 and 3 seeds in the ACC or in the Big 12. That way, their best team automatically gets in, which is fine. Those conferences need to do that to survive, but it's going to kill everything about winning winning an ACC title. For the SEC, the first 2 teams automatically get in. Same thing with the Big 10. Number 3 would play number 6. Number 4 would play number 5. And that is a wild format, right? They're going to do a little tournament, play more games, get more money, and just figure out how they're going to benefit the system for themselves. And as we talked a little bit about yesterday, right? This is not great. This is not a good thing at all. The conference domination will change as times go on. Right now, it's these 2 conferences. Right now, it's the Big 10 and it's the SEC. They're the conferences that are dominating, but you're already starting to see the SEC slip up a little bit. There was no SEC representation in this year's Final Four outside of Texas, who barely was an SEC member, a first year over there. They go out, and especially in the NIL era, they don't really have the big money alumni that's going to be able to keep their programs afloat. Texas is going to dominate in this era. The teams up on the West Coast in California and up in the Northeast are going to dominate. We're seeing Michigan be really good at recruiting right now because they have these big money backers that are willing to put a lot of money into the program and get these guys to show up when they pay them to, right? Michigan, as an example of one of those Big 10 schools that's going to dominate, the SEC is starting to lose ground. So the SEC is attaching its wagon to the Big 10 while they are kind of at equal footing, and they're saying, we're going to set this in stone now. We will be one of the top conferences. But as we see over time, it changes. You go back to the early 2000s, USC was a part of the Pac-12, Miami, part of the Big East. Those conferences were the dominant ones of their era. You have in the 1990s, it was the Big 8 or the Big 12 with Nebraska and Colorado, Oklahoma being dominant in their conferences over there. This changes. The Big 12, the Pac-12, the Big East doesn't even exist in football anymore, right? That's just about 20 years ago at this point. And I'm not saying that the SEC is going to implode. I'm not saying the Big 10 is going to implode because they're just not. But the fact that they're putting their stamp on this and they're saying, this is how it's going to be forever. We're forever going to be the best conference. It's just not true. And for them to put this set in stone for the sport that we are better than you forever is going to hurt the growth of every other program. It's going to hurt the growth of every other school. The other 75% of the country, it's just 25% of the country is represented by the Big 10 and the SEC, which is a large majority, and a lot of those big-time schools are in there. But alienating 75% of the colleges in the NCAA by saying, we're better than you and there's nothing you can do about it, is not a good look. And I'm not saying that they aren't the best right now, right? Because they are. You take a look at the way that the bids would go, presumably last year or this year, if they went to 14 or 16 teams, there were already 4 Big 10 teams in the 12-team playoff. There would have been at least 4 SEC teams if we had made it that far. Alabama was just outside of missing it, so was South Carolina. So they're probably going to get those bids anyway. Over the last 11 years, if you went out, the SEC and the Big 10 both would have averaged about 5 bids per year. The auto bids for the ACC and the Big 12 would have bid somewhere around 2. The group of 5 would have gotten that 1. And then it's the question about Notre Dame, right? So the way that they're structuring it is based on recent history. But like I said, this changes. The only time that this is really going to be a problem is when it doesn't work the way that it's supposed to right now, right? If you are going to get in trouble with these automatic bids, it's going to be when you add that 4th team that doesn't deserve to be there, right? When the ACC has 3 teams, when the Big 12 has 3 teams, when Notre Dame and a group of 5 team both deserve to get in, right? That's when the issue is going to start to pop up. It's not going to be in a year like most years where the SEC and the Big 10 are dominating, but it's going to come in a year like this one, where the SEC maybe slips up a bit, doesn't have 4 teams that deserve to get into the playoffs, where the Big 10 maybe slips up, doesn't have 4 teams that deserve to get into the playoffs, and then we're going to get complaining. I know the committee isn't very good, right? They have arbitrary scales and it hasn't been consistent, and they're trying to find their way around it. That's fine. If you just want to go off standings, you can do that. But it's tough to do it in a fair way. If you're going to do that, put the same amount of auto bids. Put 2 auto bids for each of the Power 4 conferences and do a bunch of at-larges. You're still going to get your teams in there. But to put a stamp on the world of college football, to put a stamp on everything that's going on in college sports and say, if you don't do this, we're going to leave, it's not only going to hurt the organization now, because they already are just like a sham organization being run by the SEC and the Big Ten, but it's going to hurt it in the future. And it's going to hurt a lot of the implications as we go further for these teams that are starting to grow and develop a bit of a program. We're never going to see new teams at the top. And that's part of the thing about sports. Teams should be able to grow and improve and get to the top. But if you're going to do this in college football, you're just going to alienate 75% of the possibility, 75% of the colleges in the organization, basically saying, you don't have a shot. You're not in the Big Ten. You don't have a shot. You're not in the SEC. It's going to be a big, big meeting, and we will keep you updated all week as they meet and anything coming out of there, because that is going to be a thing to watch if you're looking at the future of college football. But we're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we turn our attention over to the NFL. Justin Fields is a really intriguing quarterback prospect for where he might go. Obviously, he has entered free agency for the first time, a former first-round pick. The Steelers made him a successful quarterback, 4-2. But what's he going to do in the future? And how much might he get paid? We'll talk about that and much more coming up next here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, I'm losing shit. A stupid myth, you choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Tuesday, February 18th. If you were just tuning in, we just finished going over one of the league-altering meetings, a sport-altering meeting that is taking place between the SEC and the Big Ten about the future of college football. If you want to check that out, go back a little bit here on our broadcast. In this segment, we turn our attention over to the NFL. Justin Fields, a hot name in the quarterback market in a not super exciting quarterback class, whether that be free agency or through the draft. In this segment, we'll talk about where he might end up and what a contract for Justin Fields might turn out to be. But before we do that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Tuesday, February 18th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into our next topic here, which is Justin Fields. Where will Justin Fields end up? That is the big question. Pittsburgh declined his $25 million fifth-year option that comes with a first-round contract. 4 years and that fifth-year option. They turned it down after trading for him from the Chicago Bears. It was a true prove-it deal, and he did his job. He wasn't named the starter at the beginning of the year, but Russell Wilson was hurt. In his 6 games that he started, he went 4-2. Then Russell Wilson took over. Russell Wilson led them to the playoffs. They finished with a positive record. They went 6-5 under Russell Wilson. And now it seems like the Steelers are leaning more towards keeping Justin Fields. Their owner, Art Rooney, said that they were going to keep one of the two of them on a long-term deal. But as the quarterback market has continued to develop, as the quarterback market has continued to show that it's not really the best one out there, the Steelers have the leg up on everybody else because they have those two options at quarterback. Justin Fields has emerged as the second most desirable quarterback behind Sam Darnold. Now, if it was up to me, I would take Justin Fields ahead of Sam Darnold. But from the front office standpoints of a lot of general managers, a lot of guys up top, they are looking at Sam Darnold first, then Justin Fields, which is going to drive his price up. We've heard numbers being in the range of $35 to $40 million per year for Justin Fields, a guy that has shown talent but hasn't really shown that huge jump to be a true full-time starting quarterback. The Jets and the Steelers are the teams that have seemed the most interested in Justin Fields. The Jets obviously move off of Aaron Rodgers, and now they need to find a quarterback. They've got Tyrod Taylor rostered. That's not a guy that you really want to go into a season as your number one. One of the best backups in the league, but he's not really a guy that you think will be a long-term answer. Justin Fields also, not sure if people will think of him as a long-term answer, and that's where the interesting question comes in. The Steelers say they want to do a longer-term deal. They've been kind of doing with these bridge quarterbacks ever since Big Ben retired, trying to find the option. They drafted Kenny Pickett. He acted more like a bridge quarterback. He was only there for 2 years, right? They've attempted to find the answer, but they've been unsuccessful. Justin Fields on a return, there could be a couple different deals, right? A couple deals that I think might go his way. A couple things that might be put across the table for Justin Fields are either going to be a 1-year prove-it deal or kind of like the Daniel Jones contract. Not talking money-wise, although it could be around the same amount of dollar value, but we're talking one where a team, after a year or 2 years, has an out based on the front-loading of the money. And I think when you're looking at quarterbacks, in this class in particular for free agents, Sam Darnold, Justin Fields, Russell Wilson, if you're going to sign these guys to long-term contracts, if you're going to give them a 3-4 year deal that, is more standard of NFL quarterbacks nowadays, that is the way to do it. When we were talking a couple years ago about the Giants signing Daniel Jones, it wasn't a good contract because he wasn't the right player. It was a good contract because it gave the Giants an out after 2 years, right? And obviously, it's all kind of blown up in their face. They had to pay him a little bit. He won a playoff game, and everything that could have gone wrong kind of did go wrong for Daniel Jones and the Giants. But why? But because they had that out in the contract this year, they were able to move off after 2 years instead of sitting here and suffering for 2 more years of Daniel Jones. And I think that's the way to do it. A potential Justin Fields contract could either be a 1-year, $40 million deal, a true prove-it deal. Hey, we're going to give you the bag for this 1 year. You have to go out and prove that you're going to be our guy. We'll make sure you have the weapons, and it's going to be an exclusive rights deal. So it's not going to be an unrestricted free agent. We're going to try and make it so you are a restricted free agent after this. The other one, and I think that the one that I think is a little more accurate for how it's going to go, is somewhere along the lines of a 3-year, $105 million contract, right? $70 million of that guaranteed, a team out after 2 years. So like I was saying, front load that money. Make sure that there's not a lot of dead cap space after the first or the second year, and you can move off of him. This is probably the best option. You have a quarterback that could turn into a true, really good starter, a quarterback up to probably maybe even a top 10 quarterback in this league. He's got that kind of skill, but he needs to be put in the right system. He needs to be developed the right way. And if it doesn't work out, you can draft his replacement. You could let him sit behind Justin Fields for a year or two, especially if we're looking at one of those teams like the Giants, especially if we're looking at a team like the Titans, like the Browns, that might end up taking a quarterback in the first round that maybe they don't think is 100% ready to start right away. Justin Fields can come in and be the starter for 1, 2, potentially even 2 years. You go and draft Shadur Sanders, you draft Cam Ward, you draft Jackson Dart later on. You let them sit behind him, and you see if Justin Fields is the guy. And if he's not, you have the guy waiting in the wings. You have someone that can come in and answer for him. So I think a 3-year, $105 million contract is kind of what I'm looking at for Justin Fields to get. Where he's going to go, I think he ends up going to the New York Jets. I think they're more desperate for a quarterback than anybody else. The Steelers might just end up swapping quarterbacks at this point. Justin Fields, I think, might be asking a little bit too much of the Steelers. And because of that, I think he ends up going to the team that seemingly wants him more in the New York Jets. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. Where does he end up? What do you think the contract would look like? What do you think the best possible option is for teams signing him and for him as he goes further into his career? I'd love to hear your thoughts. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we turn our attention to some more NFL talk. The offseason continues to roll along, and we continue to go over what a perfect offseason might look like for each and every NFL team. This time, we turn our attention to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as we kick off the NFC South. But before, we'll be right back here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Tuesday, February 18th. I hope everybody is having a great day. If you were just tuning in, we just finished going over what the offseason might look like for Justin Fields, where he might end up, and what a contract might look like for him. In this segment, we turn our attention to the other NFL topic today, which is our continuing series of the Dream offseason, this time taking a look at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Who are their pending free agents? Who are the big ones that they need to re-sign? What do they need to do to make sure that this season is more successful than the last? But before we do that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Tuesday, February 18th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into the dream offseason for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers had a pretty solid season. It started off not the way they wanted to, right? They were losing to the Falcons. They lost both games against the Falcons, and it seemed like they were not going to be able to repeat for a third straight time as NFC South champions. They turned it around at the end. The Falcons kind of lost the plot a little bit. They went 10-7 won the NFC South title for the third straight season, and then they lost in the wild card round to the Washington Commanders on a walk-off field goal, the only close wild card game that there was all playoffs long. They are in an interesting situation. They don't have too many free agents that feel like a necessity for them to sign. They have 22 pending free agents, but there's only a couple that I think are a big deal. Shaq Barrett only played in one game. He's a free agent. If he wants to come back, they can probably get him on a pretty cheap deal. He retired and then came back later in the season just to play with Tampa, so that tells you something about how easy it would be for him to come back. Offensive guard Ben Bredeson, I think, is super important for them to bring back. Ben Bredeson started all 17 games this year for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He was out there for 99% of the snaps. He only took 2 penalties all season long, and they were both false starts penalties. He had a great season in his first year in this system after leaving the New York Giants. Ben Bredeson is a must re-sign for them. He was really good all year long. The other one that I think is a must re-sign is Lavonte David. Lavonte David is getting up there in age. He's 35 years old, but he still led the team in tackles and sacks. 5.5 sacks, 122 tackles on the year for Lavonte David. He is the heart and soul of that defense. He is one of the best defensive players out there, one of the best pure linebackers there are in the entire NFL right now. But he's also getting old. So you can't give him that long-term contract. You also can't let him walk. Currently, the cap space situation is not too great. Before they make space for anything, before they restructure contracts, which the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have been pretty good at all the whole time that Jason Light has been there as the general manager, is $5 million. That puts them 23rd best in the NFL. They need to make a little bit of room. Like I said, there's 2 guys that are leaving the team or potentially leaving the team that they do need to re-sign, that being Ben Bredeson and Lavonte David. They are going to lose a couple people, though. Greg Gaines was the backup to Vita Vea. He played 41% of the snaps. They probably don't need to re-sign him. He's probably gone. Chris Godwin, by all accounts, is not going to be re-signed, and neither is Sterling Shepard. Sterling Shepard I could see coming back, but he's not a guy that I think needs to come back for them to be successful. The emergence of Jalen McMillan down the stretch of the season, that was a very promising rookie season for him. You pair him next to Mike Evans, that's going to be a very solid wide receiver core, and you can find a wide receiver 3 a lot of different places. When we talk about what they might target, the Buccaneers might target as we head into free agency, we're going to look at that wide receiver 3 position. They don't have the greatest ability when it comes to paying free agents, so you're not going to be able to get these top-end wide receivers. You can go out and get a guy that I really like in KJ Osborne. I think he would be really good in this system. Elijah Moore as a quick little slot receiver for them to replace Chris Godwin with might be really good. And an interesting one that I was looking at as well is Nick Westbrook-Ikhine. Nick Westbrook-Ikhine had a breakout season, really. He's had a couple better seasons in the past, but he was just a touchdown scoring machine last year with the Tennessee Titans. He's going to get some money. I'm curious if that could be with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, because I like that fit as a wide receiver 3. The other one that I think they desperately need is edge rushers. That's where they struggled. They had trouble getting pressure on the quarterback. They had trouble getting sacks. There's a couple guys that I don't think would be super expensive, but could be really impactful if they get put in the right system. Chase Young was a top 5 draft pick in the NFL draft. He has not really turned out the way that a lot of people expected. He was supposed to be the next best thing, the next great defensive end to come out of Ohio State. He hasn't really worked out. He's bounced around the league since being traded to the 49ers, spent this season with the Saints. Now he's a free agent again. If the Bucs can bring him in on a cheap prove-it deal, that could do wonders for them. Marcus Davenport, who had a really good start to the year for the Lions before getting hurt early on in the season and missing the rest of it, is another guy that could be huge for them on the edge. Chase Young, Marcus Davenport, and Azeez Ojulari, the 24-year-old who's going to be a free agent from the New York Giants. We talked about him yesterday when we did the Giants free agent perfect season breakdown. I love Ojulari. I think he's a guy that's extremely underrated, and you can get him on a pretty cheap deal to come down to Tampa Bay. They've had some success with former Giants on that team, so I think that could be something that works out. From the linebacker position, looking at Josh Uche. Josh Uche has been the backup to a lot of different great linebacking cores when it comes to his time in the NFL. He was with the Patriots, and most recently, he's been with the Kansas City Chiefs. And that linebacking core for the Kansas City Chiefs is amazing. It's probably the best linebacking core in all of the NFL. The way that they're able to play, the way that they're able to stop the run and drop into pass coverage is incredibly impressive. You can grab Josh Uche probably for pretty cheap, again, if you don't take a linebacker in the draft. And there's a couple linebackers in the draft that I think might be available for them at pick number 19. The one that I'm circling is Jalen Walker. Jalen Walker, the linebacker out of Georgia, is a guy that I think could come in and be immediately impactful. Not only are they going to need a linebacker for this season, they're going to lose a couple of their depth pieces at linebacker to free agency, but also, like we said, Levante David is 35 years old. He's not going to be able to play at this elite level for too long. Getting a linebacker to come in and fix that would be huge. You could also go edge rusher. Again, Mykel Williams out of Georgia. He's climbing up draft boards a little bit, but if he's still there at 19, it's going to be hard to pass up. Another guy that I like is Nick Scourton out of Texas A&M. He's going to be the second one of those guys to probably go off that defensive line of Texas A&M, but that was an excellent defensive line, one of the best in all of the country, and that's what we're looking at for the draft. At pick 19, either a linebacker or an edge player, or if they can get best available. I know in my mock that I did most recently, Luther Burden was still available there, and it's hard to pass him up when it comes to a team that maybe they get another weapon like that and they can really explode offensively. But the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I think, have a pretty simple offseason formula, right? They've got a lot of their guys already locked up. They handled that last season. Bring back Ben Bredeson. Bring back Levante David. Go out and get a wide receiver 3, an edge rusher, and draft a linebacker. I think that's the way to get it done. That's how they improve, and that's how they go for a 4th straight NFC South title. But let me know what your thoughts are. I'd love to hear them. What would you do if you were the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in free agency? What would you do in the draft? I'd love to hear it. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we turn our attention to baseball. The season is right around the corner. Spring training is here, and we're going to preview all 30 MLB teams. We're finishing off the NL West today, talking about the Colorado Rockies. What did they do this last offseason? Are they going to be better? We'll answer all those questions coming up next here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found. For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Tuesday, February 18th. If you are just tuning in, we just finished going over what a perfect offseason might look like for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. In this segment, we turn our attention to baseball and take a look at what the offseason was like for the Colorado Rockies. The Rockies did not have a great season last year. We'll talk about if they improved and if they can find a way out of the basement of the NL West. But before we do that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Tuesday, February 18th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into the MLB season preview. We're going to talk a little bit about the Colorado Rockies here today. They went 61-101 last season. That is good for the second worst record in all of baseball, only trailing the worst team in the history of baseball, Chicago White Sox, who only won 41 games last season. Obviously, they missed the playoffs, and we're sitting at 5th out of a possible 5 spots in the NL West. And it's not going to get a lot easier this year because the NL West, everyone other than the Rockies, really got a lot better, or at least improved in areas where the Rockies just kind of at best stayed the same. They didn't do a lot in free agency, not a lot they could have done. They got Keston Hiura and Austin Nola, 2 minor league contracts, both guys that have shown flashes up in the major league level before. The Rockies went out and got a starting second baseman in Thairo Estrada, 1-year deal up in the majors, as well as re-signing Jacob Stallings. Jacob Stallings, who's a pretty good defensive catcher, but not the best offensive weapon they have. They weren't really great at going out and getting guys to improve this team, but the Rockies have always been a very cheap organization, at least as of late, and they let a lot of key guys go. Cal Quantrill, who was one of their starters last season, Brendan Rodgers, the second baseman, Daniel Bard, a pretty solid relief pitcher, as well as Jake Cave and Dakota Hudson, an outfielder and starting pitcher, were all losses in free agency or due to waivers, right? They let all of these guys walk. And when we take a look at this roster, this lineup is not scary at all. Brenton Doyle leading off in center, Ezekiel Tovar at shortstop, Ryan McMahon playing third, Chris Bryant, a 33-year-old Chris Bryant at DH, Michael Toglia at first base, a combination of Nolan Jones and Kyle Farmar being put to platoon in left field, Thairo Estrada, as we mentioned earlier, at second base, Jordan Beck in right field, and Jacob Stallings at the number 9 to play catcher. That is not a lineup that inspires a lot of hope. When we take a look at where this Rockies team is now, this is a Rockies team that is not going to be a lot better than it was last season. The lineup is not improved. I know it's going to be a little bit easier to hit because they're up there at Mile High Stadium over in Coors Field, so the balls fly a little bit further. But these guys aren't necessarily the most powerful power-hitting guys, right? That's the guys you want to bring over to Colorado. They have not been able to do that. There's a couple pieces that could be good. Ezekiel Tovar has shown some flashes. Chris Bryant could potentially get back to his Cubs form, and that might help them a little bit, but I just don't see it all clicking together this season. This is not a team that really draws a lot of oohs and ahs. And the rotation, it's even worse. It's one of the worst rotations in all of the sport right now. You have Herman Marquez as your number 1 pitcher, and it's not great. I know not a lot of pitchers want to go and play for Colorado. It hurts their numbers. It's not an easy place to play, but you thought you'd be able to get a better rotation than Ryan Feltner at 2, Kyle Freeland at 3, Antonio Senzatella at 4, and Austin Gomber at 5. It's just not a good rotation. It's not a good lineup. And it's the same for the bullpen. Their closer projected to be Tyler Kinley, and then their setup guys. You have Luis Peralta and Seth Halverson, right? These are not guys that are going to come out and have elite seasons. This is a team that I think could be the worst in baseball. They didn't go out and spend money when they needed to. They don't have that farm system that they need when they're going to get some of these elite players, when they're trying to attract elite players, right? They had something going in Colorado in the early 2000s, but it's all gone now. And a lot of that is because the ownership has been super cheap. And that's not a thing that's just an issue for the Colorado Rockies, right? That's a thing that's the biggest issue plaguing baseball right now. The fact that the owners nowadays are pretty cheap. Now, the Rockies are suffering for it currently. We saw them go 61 and 101 last season. The over-under for them set this year is even lower at 58.5. The only team that's projected to be worse than them is the Chicago White Sox, who are projected at 53.5 wins. And I just don't see this team doing anything good or anything special when it comes down to it. This is a team that once again is going to finish at the bottom of the NL West. This is a team that once again is going to be competing for the worst roster, for the worst record in all of baseball, and they don't even have guys that I think are going to be necessarily great to flip at the deadline. So it's going to be tough to build that farm system more. They need to go out and they need to spend some money, and that's when changes will start to be made. Overall, I think they're going to go under that. I think they finish the season at around 58 wins. 58 wins, 104 losses is something that we're looking at here, and I wouldn't be shocked. I'd be more shocked if they won. If they lost less than 100 games than if they lost more than 100 games at this point. This is a team that just has no really positive trajectory. The Rockies are going to continue to sit at the basement, especially with the way that the Dodgers, the Padres, the Diamondbacks, and the Giants all improved this offseason. But let me know what you think. What do you think the Colorado Rockies are going to do this season? Do you think they have any chance to get something going this year? I'd love to hear your thoughts. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we go over the biggest drama around baseball right now, and that is the case of the Red Sox versus Rafael Devers. We'll talk about that and much more coming up next here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Tuesday, February 18th. I hope everybody's having a great day so far. If you were just tuning in, we just finished going over what the Colorado Rockies might look like in the 2025 MLB season, coming off of a disaster year for them. In this segment, we finish off our show talking a little bit about the big drama surrounding the Red Sox third baseman / DH Rafael Devers. We're going to talk about what's going on there, who's right, who's wrong, and how they fix this situation. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Tuesday, February 18th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into a little bit about the Red Sox versus Rafael Devers. And this is a really interesting situation. Obviously, when the Red Sox brought in, this all started when the Red Sox brought in third baseman of the Houston Astros, Alex Bregman. They signed him to a 3-year, $120 million deal with some deferred payments in there. Now, their best player on the roster last season was their third baseman as well, in Rafael Devers. Now, Rafael Devers was fine with this move because at the beginning, it seemed like they were going to move Bregman over to second base, but that just has not worked out. They had him over at second base, and it wasn't working. Now, as spring training has continued, they moved Bregman over to third base, and they've brought up a young prospect who was climbing through the system incredibly quickly in Kirsten Campbell, to take the second baseman spot because he is a second baseman, and getting a guy in Alex Bregman who is just a much better defensive player over at third base while not losing the bat of Rafael Devers is going to be huge for this Red Sox team. Now, Devers has come out and been vocally unhappy about this, right? That's where all of this is coming from. Rafael Devers said that when the Red Sox signed him, when they did, it was a different GM, a different manager. They said, you are going to be our third baseman forever for the length of this contract. And Rafael Devers is locked in for the long term. He is there for a very long time. But he also has been one of the worst defensive third basemen in all of the MLB. If you go back to just last season, Rafael Devers was tied for the worst in all of the baseball at -4 on Fangraphs defensive rating, right? That is not good. You have a guy in Alex Bregman who was much higher up on that list. Alex Bregman is a guy that has played Gold Glove level defense, and there is some flashes for Rafael Devers. He's got the arm, he's got the ability to come up on it, but his mistakes have cost them games a lot of times. This is a Red Sox team that is looking at being one of the better teams in baseball this year. They've got the guys, they've got the pitching, they've got the bats now, and if they can just get the defense right, which is a hugely underrated piece of baseball, this is a team that could go really, really far. Now, Rafael Devers is a very talented player. There's no doubt about that, right? Rafael Devers is a guy that will be still one of the best players on this team. But the fact that he's not willing to talk about moving positions to better the team, I think is ridiculous. Putting him at DH is probably the best option. You have other players who have been long time certain positions being okay with moving, right? For example, the Houston Astros are trying out Jose Altuve, their longtime second baseman, in left field while they talk about putting Alvarez on to permanent DH watch, right? That is something that I think would be good. Yordan Alvarez is a guy that's been dealing with injuries, and Yordan Alvarez is a guy that probably would benefit from playing DH full-time, which he basically already does, but after the loss of Kyle Tucker, they needed a left fielder. So guys like that are fine with switching positions. The fact that Rafael Devers is being so against it, I think is going to hurt this team. I think at the end of the day, he's going to be fine with playing DH. He's DH'd a whole bunch on his off days. It's just the fact that he's not going to be playing third base, which I understand can be a point of pride for a lot of these guys, right? They went in and they promised him, hey, he's not going to take your job. You're still going to be the third baseman. He's going to go play second base. And then they turn around and it doesn't work out. They change their mind. They have him playing third base. They have you playing DH, and that feels like a little bit of betrayal. But for the good of the team, for the Red Sox, for his chance to win a World Series, which I think the Red Sox have a real chance of doing this year, they need him to be a DH, and Alex Bregman at third base. But let me know what you think. What do you think is the best way to handle this? How do you think the Red Sox should get this done? I'd love to hear your thoughts. And thank you, everybody, so much for tuning in to today's episode of GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I have been your host, Jeremy Lapidus. We'll be back tomorrow talking all things sports. I will see you then. You all have a good one. Bye-bye.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of